Some got some familiar faces in the class today. Just a couple of things I like to start with at the beginning of this we're doing a session. I'll talk through what the contents are today, but just a few little ground rule things in here. I am going to be doing a lot of work on this board, which means it's going to be hard to see if you're in this view that looks like the Brady Bunch up there with all the tiles. So one thing you can do to make that easier and better for you is that if you click on the three dots and pin me, select the option to pin over my image, then I will be the main screen no matter who's talking. Okay, so if someone has a question and you still want to see what's on the board, it will remain with my screen up there. Also, if you have the ability to turn your camera on, it is so much nicer to see faces than it is to see names. As I train and support going through this, it's helpful to see people getting, thank you, very nice to see you. Okay, also, I want you to get the most out of this possible, okay? So feel free to interrupt me. Feel free to, don't worry about raising hands or just jump in and ask anytime, okay? Make me stop and say, wait a second, hold up. I don't get this, you know, help me understand this a little bit better, okay? We have plenty of time associated to this, okay? Content on the board is probably a good 90 minutes worth of content. That means there's plenty of room for questions and dialogue and tangents we might want to take, okay? So feel free to jump in and ask anything, even if it's not completely aligned with what we're talking about on the board today, okay? So just to share the detail of what we're talking about today, we're going to be talking about the discovery process. This is where all sales are won and lost, okay? It is where we gather all the information and we learn about our prospect. We determine fit. If you were part of or saw some of the sessions before, we talked about that sales process. It's kind of the second step in the sales process. We want to understand our prospect better, okay? So we'll dive deep into that area and really share with you and how we go through that process. All right, when we get into the next step, the other topic we're going to be talking about is sales presentation best practices, okay? So we're just going to be talking about, I can't tell you how to do your sales presentation exactly right, but I am going to give you an order of operations and share with you the things that people struggle with in sales presentations and what people are doing right and wrong to kind of turn the prospect off or get them engaged more. One of the big things that people fumble with or struggle with is prospects ghosting them after a demo. They're all like, oh, this was exciting. Thank you so much. Why don't you call me back in a couple of weeks and we'll talk? Never, right? And they just disappear and we never hear from them again. We're going to talk about some ideas on how to minimize or even eliminate that from being a problem, okay? Because that seems to be the biggest issue for everybody, all right? There's some easy ways to get around it. All right, any questions for anyone before we get started? Okay, let's get everybody remembering where the discovery process falls. If we were, oh yes, Ritu.
And hi, morning, sorry. Yeah, quick question, just to know that can you just briefly mention what topics you have already covered in first two sessions, because I could not attend them, so I don't ask the same questions you may have covered and maybe in recording.
Oh, you know what? You ask any question you want through this process. I don't care what direction it goes or how it breaks from what we're talking about today. We have plenty of time to talk on things, okay? So we've started at the beginning where we were talking about ideal customer profile and personas and understanding what that looks like. We walked through a little bit of what an outreach cadence looks like and how to execute down that. We talked about scripting, and saying how to communicate when someone does pick up the phone. How do we open up the conversation a little bit better? Okay. And now we're going, okay, we started the conversation. How do we dive deep to understand? Okay, that's where we are right now.
Thank you.
Okay? Yeah. So when it comes to the discovery process, as I was just saying, that starts right after someone says, you know what? Yes, what you're talking about is a big problem for me. So maybe just as a quick recap, let's talk about that opening conversation for a minute, okay? We outlined what an opening conversation looks like. We said we start with that intro. We move to the break. Then we go to our ask, our story, and our test. Okay? And I just tested my marker and it doesn't work very well. So we go to the next. All right. So if we remember the intro, it was really all about context, right? It was just, hi, my name is, and I'm with this company. Okay. And that creates a reaction of like, sales rep, uh-oh, and everybody's like, how do I get rid of the sales rep? How do I not talk to that person ever again? I'm so busy right now. I don't need to be talking to the sales rep. Let's move on. And we got to break that body language, right? That's why we said break here. This is our disruption. Okay. This is our disruption. And it basically sounds like this together. Hi, my name's Dan O'Reilly. I'm with a company called Fuel Sales. Does that name sound familiar? And we're trying to get them to engage right away to go, oh, wait a second. Should I know you? What? And if you do that correctly, there's a lot more explanation in the previous recording. So if you want to know a little bit more detail about this process, you can listen to those. But if you do that right, you should kind of get the answer no with a question mark, like, no, what? No, I don't know you guys. Why? Or who are you? Okay. And then we move into our ask, and we called that our give get. Remember, we had two parts to that. We said, that sounds like, you know what, that's okay. Do you mind if I take 30 seconds to tell you why I'm calling? And then you can tell me whether or not I should continue the conversation or we need to talk any further. And you usually get a response of, sure. And then this is the big part, our story. Our story is going to be all about issues. And if you had listened to some of the other ones, we know that people buy based on emotion. And the faster we get to develop that emotion and at least in this case, trigger that emotion with them with issues, the faster we can get them to engage with us, right? We're not calling and pitching somebody about our product. Nobody wants to hear a pitch about our product unless they know that it can help them and it can solve some of their problems. So we save that till the end when we really know, man, they have the problems we can solve, right? So we start with issues. We share the issues that we know we can help and decide whether or not they're a good fit. And we end with a test question. That test question is about engagement, okay? We're saying, of those issues, can you relate to any of those or those things that you're experiencing, right? And if someone says yes, that's when we move into discovery, okay? That was a really fast run through. There's a ton more information to talk about when it comes to this. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about that and you haven't had a chance yet, dive into that previous recording a couple of weeks ago and listen to that section. It'll tell a lot more detail about how to open the conversation in the best way possible so that we can move into the discovery process, okay? So what someone has said here is, you know what you're talking about is worth having a conversation, okay? What you're discussing with me, the topic that you've brought up is challenging to me. It's a struggle to me. I'm experiencing it and I'm frustrated with it, or I'm concerned, right? And so now we're ready to move in and say, you know what? Is this a good fit for us? Is the problem worth solving, right? Because in sales, it's really about creating change, right? Your biggest competitor is always going to be status quo. Your customer is in a place right now and they're moving along and you are trying to make them change, do something different, right? And in order for them to do something different, the issue has to be big enough and bad enough for them to even consider change, right? And where a lot of sales reps make mistakes is they will say, do you have this problem? And the person says yes. And they go immediately into solving the problem and say, oh, you do? Well, let me tell you all about us and how we can solve that problem. You know why that's bad? You know why that doesn't work in most cases? It's because the person is not ready to receive the solution yet. They are not emotional enough. We haven't talked through it and really developed that pain, right? They may say, yeah, I have that problem, but when we talk to them about our solution, they're like, it's not big enough, it's not bad enough, I'm not really ready to make an adjustment there yet. They don't see the need to change, okay? And so the discovery process is about developing that pain and getting the person into an emotional state to receive the solution. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so let me start this by drawing a little funnel here and how we move people through this discovery funnel. Okay, and at the top of this, whoops, we've identified an issue. Okay, someone said yes, they have a problem. Okay, and that's how they kind of enter into the discovery funnel. And like we were just talking about, the first thing we want to do is we want to understand. Okay, that's step number one. It is not sell, right? Most sales reps that are struggling or frustrated that don't actually get it, they're moving forward and trying to push. Guess why they call them pushy sales reps, right? It's because they're trying to push a product on that they don't understand fit yet. Okay, and so our focus is, I really need to understand, and what I'm understanding is how big and how bad that problem really is, the big and bad of it. Okay, and the way this is typically taught in sales training classes out there is that they say, all right, we're going to build a decision tree and we're going to build out the questions. And we're going to start talking about, if they say this, then say this. If they say this, then say this, and keep moving through it. Or they build out a list of discovery questions and say, ask all these things. And if you check 5 out of the 7 boxes, they're qualified, right? So make sure you ask all these questions. I don't like either one of those choices, because what that does is it changes the focus of the conversation from being about the customer to being about what I need to move them forward. And what I want to do is focus on the customer and what their challenges are. And when we get to that end of that conversation, I'll determine if it's a good fit for us. Okay. The other thing that is a problem with those two approaches is that one of the skills we talked about being very important in the sales process is active listening, right? And when you are so totally focused on following this process of answering these questions, you tend to disengage about what the person is saying. I'll give you a very clear example of this. I went to a company to assess their salespeople. They asked me to sit in and listen to them prospect. And I had one of the people making phone calls. They got a hold of somebody, talked to them for about 1 minute and 30 seconds, and then they hung up. And I said, that didn't sound like it went very well. I said, it really didn't. And I said, you asked this question. What did they say to that? And he looked at me and was like, I don't remember. And I was like, it was 30 seconds ago. How do you not remember that? And he's like, well, you know, to tell you the truth, I wasn't listening to her. I was trying to think of the next question to ask. So your mind can get so distracted from the person because you're so worried about what do you need to accomplish that you're not listening. Okay, so we really need to become strong, active listeners in this. Okay, it's okay. It's okay to create some crutches and build out some ideas and try to understand how that conversation is going to go. But eventually you have to move into a position where you throw all that away and just have a genuine conversation with another human. Yes.
So then the question on that is, it's a little bit higher level question, but most sales reps are measured by their quota. How many demos you got before that, how many calls you made. I 110% agree with you. They have to be listening. Otherwise, what's the point of asking question? And I will do that. but the compensation of salespeople is tied to the number. So I have one of the rep and I can totally see him doing this. Somebody ask the question, spitting it out and not even listening. How do you balance that?
So what you're saying is their incentive doesn't match what we're trying to go forward with.
Ask them to do, yeah.
Yeah, so typical incentive for like an SDR, we can talk about that briefly. Like an SDR is, there's two areas that they can control. They can control the volume of meetings that are created, and they can also control the quality of those meetings. And so in order to balance that out a little bit better and force them to do more of the discovery, we weight the quality metric at a higher level. So for example, we might say, every meeting that you set, I'll give you $20. Small little, you get $20 a month, a meeting, and we tally those up at the end of the month, and here it is, done. However, if those meetings actually turn into opportunities, that means you did a quality discovery and you put somebody in front of me that was solid, then I will give you $35 for the first 4. And then if you set 5 to 10, I'll give you $50 for each one. But if you set 11 or more, I'm going to give you $80 per, all the way back. And it's like, whoa, if I work hard at getting more quality meetings, I'm going to get a lot more money. Just this $20 thing is the volume thing coming up, and that's nice, but the weight of what I'm getting paid is because I'm doing a really solid job of the discovery. Okay, so we incent what we want them to do.
But the quality will be measured eventually by whether deal goes through or not, and that can be a longer process. The
quality should be measured by whether or not the opportunity is created, not whether the deal was won or lost. So what you're doing is you're saying, if I want more of those leads to be given to me, then it was a good one. If you didn't do a good job of working through that and I kicked it out and said no opportunity, I don't pay them. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
There's kind of like these criteria where you say, MQL, are you familiar with that terminology? Yes. We've got a marketing qualified lead, then we have a sales qualified lead. Okay. Right. And so marketing qualified lead would be like, hey, we vetted this person, we understood there's a need there, and now we're handing it off to sales. And then sales does a demo and goes, man, this person said, yes, they're really ready to continue the sales process. And we check a box and say, that's an SQL, we're ready to move forward. And we go, okay, we'll pay the SDR for that. All right. Okay. So I don't care. I don't want to pay the SDR ever for anything to do with closing business, because what that turns into is my SDR going, hey, I gave you a deal. How come you didn't close it? And they start trying to manage the sales rep. We don't want that. Right. So we want that to be a good, harmonious relationship. And so that's how it's looked at.
Yeah. Could I ask a quick question about that too? Does that create positive conversations between the SDR and the salesperson?
It does. It does.
Okay.
What you want to be able to do with this is that, so typically the sales rep, you want them to be able to say, I loved what you gave me. This is awesome. Send me more. And if they don't like it, you want them to talk to the manager. And you want them to say, hey, this one wasn't working really well. Here's what I saw. The manager then can coach the SDR and help them, so that the only feedback loop that they are getting from their AE is, love it, you're doing a great job. Love it, you're doing a great job. And then the coach or the manager can support the negative side of it and turn that into more of a coaching moment instead of this AE doesn't like what you did. Right? So we try to maneuver it that way.
So sorry, no. Dan, don't want to hijack. Continue. Sorry.
We've got plenty of time. So anytime something triggers a question in there, let me know. So, all right. So getting back to this piece of it, we were saying, you know what, we want to be really active listeners, and we don't want to turn this into some kind of decisions tree or or a bunch of list of questions that we have to check boxes on and interrogate someone instead of have a conversation with them, right? And so, but we want to have some kind of flow to it, or else the prospect is going to be like, where are we going with this? Why are we not? So the way to look at that is that we want to think about it as a process conversation, okay? When you have a pain that someone is dealing with, what you're really wanting to understand about them is, how are they doing this today without you? What do they have in place? What kind of steps are they taking? What are they doing today? So that you can understand the difference between how you would help them and what they are doing, okay? So what we do is we focus on process, okay? It is a very focused conversation that says we have a stepped plan to walk through, okay? And every process has a beginning, middle, and end, right? You start with something, you go through a process, and you end with something, right? And so we usually create 3 buckets, okay? And we say, what are the things, what are the milestones, what are the events that are happening at the beginning, middle, and end of the process, where I can kind of put some flag posts to know that I'm moving down the conversation in the right way, okay? If you try to start at the end and then jump to the middle, it just seems like you're ping-ponging around a conversation. And just to take a step back, the reason why we go with process is because your client, your prospect, is typically just saying, this is how we do things. They don't think about it, they just do it. You know, they just execute down that way. And when they start feeling bad about it, they start diving into the details about it, and they're going, this takes so much time and so many people and so much money and so much, and they're getting frustrated by it. And so they may already feel like, wow, these are all the steps and it's so overwhelming and so frustrating if they're further into the buying process. But if they're at the top and they're not really aware, and you call them, we need to walk them through it so they start to self-discover, man, this feels bad. This sucks. And that's what starts to create emotion with somebody. Does anybody want to, just for the sake of example, does anybody want to give me a quick, 30 seconds on their product, on what they're presenting out in the world? And then I'll put it in here. Okay, Ritu?
Yeah. So is it from the customer perspective, the prospect that we are pitching to?
Share with me what your product is.
Okay, so we are circled in, think of it as a LinkedIn for high school students and colleges. Students create a holistic, authentic profile, storing everything they do all at one place. And it's a hub of opportunity for them. So it becomes a go-to platform. And for colleges and employers, they can come in based on this data-driven recruitment. They can find the best fit students, reducing their cost and improving the enrollment. We believe with that, we are creating a win-win for both sides.
Okay. And so do you sell it to both sides, or do you kind of give it away to the schools and sell it to the universities?
Second case, give it away to students. We also do B2C direct through counselors. We give it away to schools and sell to universities. Okay,
so let's talk about the university side then, so we can talk about presenting to universities. When you think about what you're doing for the universities, this is an administrative focused one. It's saying, you know what, as a recruiter, you're going to have an easier job at driving, students in, because you're going to have this built-in way of seeing where they are. And like you said, best fit students, right? And so when you're calling into these administrative, I can't really think of the office. It's escaping me. What's the title that you go after?
So we go for recruitment, enrollment, admissions department.
Yes. So the admissions, the recruitment department, that's where you're focused on it. And when you're calling them, the issue that you're sharing with them is their inability to reach their enrollment numbers, right? They're not reaching their goals.
Yes.
Right? They're like, and they say, oh yes, that's a big problem for me. Okay. Yes. And so for you, it's a process of saying, okay, let's walk through how you are doing it today. how are you attempting to drive students into your university?
Mhm.
Okay. And so the first bucket, we may call it, let's call it ID. All right. How are you identifying students that might be a good fit for your university? What kind of mechanisms, what kind of tools, what kind of systems do you use to try to identify those students? And they're going to walk through and say, oh, we do ads and we do all these, and they're going to, and we have a spot on our website, they can fill out a form and say they're interested in us, and right. And so
Yes.
you're going to start that process.
Exactly.
And then you go, okay, now that we have identified them, let's talk about converting them. How do you convert them? What kind of data do you get from them? Let me help me understand how you know they're good, bad, indifferent, right? Right. And so we're like, what do we do with the data? You know, and then we could even call this one conversion. Like, how do we convert?
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then we go to the end and we say, when you get to the end of that whole process and you look back, how do you know it's working? How do you know which one of those funnels are great for you, good for you? Which ones work the best for you? Things like that. So we can say, this is report.
Mhm.
Okay. And that's pretty basic. We're just saying that's how I kind of try to bucket information and say, that's my conversation. That's my process that I step through. Okay. I was just doing that for an SEL provider, right? So they do SEL work, just as another example. It's very similar. It's saying, how do you ID students that need support? Then what do you do to support those students? And then how do you know it's working? Right? And as you walk through that process, what's really happening is you look at yours and you say, this is the circle in process. And if they were using my product, this is the ideal path they would follow. It's fabulous. It has all these outcomes. These are the best ways to do it, right? And then we look at the actual. And when I'm talking to my prospect, I'm going, oh, no, not ideal. And I'm thinking about these different areas, and all I'm doing is like storing that information that they're sharing with me. I'm learning about how different that path is, right? And this gap that happens here, this gap, that equals value. The bigger the gap, the bigger the value. Okay? What we're doing is we're saying, I have in my mind, this is easy for everybody as founders to be able to say, I know exactly what my product does and all the wonderful things it offers, right? This is my ideal path. This is why I built it. It does these wonderful things. Now, what's the typical I'm going to hear? Where do people fall down in each one of these areas? What should I be listening for that's going to go and make it go in a different direction? Right? Maybe it's the conversion data here where they're getting a ton of people to get through, but none of them are good fits. And they're bailing and they're working so hard to try to identify it that with your tool, it's so easy. They get so much data that they know this person is a perfect fit and they can focus their attention on recruiting them instead of everybody else. And it's like, wow, how much time is that going to save them? And how much easier is it going to be able for them to reach their goals? Right? So that's a deviation from your path, your ideal path that you've created. That creates the value. Okay? Does everybody kind of get that? Is that helpful? Does that kind of align? Okay. And so
Dan, there is a question here.
Sure.
So most of us are probably startups, right? We clearly understand the actual path that's happening in the market. That's why we started these companies. When it comes to our own path, one, we may not have solid data all the way through today. Two, we all know this, pardon my French, damn industry takes like centuries to move anything forward, right? So it takes a long time for us to even gather that data. Most of the times it's hypothesis.
Yes,
How do you
it
build
is.
that in the process and say, believe me, this will change your world?
That's what it is. You know, it's better when you have clients to reference and data to support it and all those things. However, I like to be very transparent in the beginning and be able to say, hey, we're new, we're starting this thing out. And there are going to be a lot of folks, not a lot, but there's a good portion of people that if you are very transparent on the front end and saying, you're going to be part of figuring this out with us, we're going to make this work for you. You're going to be someone who can help build the foundation of what this is going to look like. That's attractive to some people because what you're doing is you're sharing with them that you understand the problem. You know the experience. You've been through it, you experienced it, you know it. So you're qualified to solve it. Right? But you know, I'm going to be very honest with you. We've built things with hypotheses and ideas, and we need people to help support the data on the back end. So we're going to be engaged with you and helping you through that process while you're helping us. Okay. Yes, Chris.
Well, I was just going to say one thing that's worked for us is to take input and feedback that's easy for us to react to and implement. And then do it, and then you actually can build that relationship because you show that you've taken their feedback and built upon it. You actually take their feedback seriously, and that bolsters the relationship. So it's kind of one easy technique that we've used.
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of companies out there that start by going, why don't I just give it away for a little bit and, you know, get it into places, and then I can learn and develop from there. And it's really hard to sell free in some cases. You know, people don't use it because it's free and they're not engaging in it. Yes. And so the best way to overcome that is to create a very formalized early adopter program. Okay. And in that program, what you're doing is you're not giving away something for free. You are trading value with them. And you talk about it like that. You say the product costs this much. However, the first 5 districts in this state are eligible for our early adopter program. And here's what the early adopter program looks like. We reduce the cost by X number, big, huge savings, right? And in return for that, what you agree to is this level of value where you are walking through it in this way. And you're saying, I need to meet with you once a week, once a month, receiving the data on this. I need to, once we hit these success metrics, I would like to do a case study with you. And you are signed up for one webinar to kind of share with the world your results. And so you need to be able to open up the data and help me kind of share this, because the value that you're giving me is the ability to excel faster. And the value I'm giving you is that this is going to be a very reduced cost. And they go, that's a good trade. And they move forward and they see the value in your product instead of you just giving it away. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot to uncover in that. And I talk about early adopter programming and building out what are the steps we need to go through in that process to get a good early adopter program in place. But I think that's essential for early stage folks to be able to get the data they need to speed up the sales process. Okay. Yeah. So that is part of this. All right. So just to get back to unless there's another question on that same topic. Okay. Let's get back to this process that we're going through. So we identified an issue. Our job right here is to understand, and just to recap a little bit, when someone is first saying, yes, I have that issue, their usual frame of mind is very logical. Okay? And that's why we don't do anything to push at this moment. We pull. And we're pulling data from them. We're learning from them. And our job through this whole process is to drive down to some kind of emotional response or emotional feel to it, okay? And why we go through this process step is because people start to go, wait a second, maybe that is a challenge for me. Maybe that is too much work. I didn't really think about it that way, okay? And your goal is not to tell them that they have a problem. It's for them to recognize and say that they have a problem, okay? Anything that comes out of their mouth, they're gonna own. But if you're talking to them and they're sharing with you some things, then you go, wow, you have a problem here, don't you? It's like, wait a second, and they're defensive, and they put up. But when they go, man, it's really taken a long time to go through that. There's a lot of, and they start to feel that. That's when we know we're moving in the right direction. Yes, Matt. Oops, you're still on mute.
Sorry, thanks. I know you've got presentation down under discovery. Is that like, is this part of like, we haven't got to the deck yet, we haven't got to our sales pitch and our deck? Is this is all just that conversation that's leading up to that?
That's absolutely correct. We're kind of in our suspect mode. We're going, should we show them anything? Or, we need to know, are they a good fit for us right now? And the only reason why we're moving into this conversation right now is they've kind of said, yes, I have that problem. So now we're going, okay, are you willing to change? Are you willing to explore anything and start to change? And that's what we're trying to do here.
Got it.
Okay. So this big bad is all focused on really focusing in the process area. We want to understand the process. I would think about it. One good way to think about it is current state. Like, how are they doing things today? If we start talking about future state, like what does it look like 3 years from now? Or what are your goals for later this year? We're moving away from what are they doing right now? Okay, so this is kind of a what, a how. What are you doing? How are you doing this, right? And some people are going to be a little bit like reserved and not opening up and not talking really well to you. So a couple of tactics in here. One is empathy. Empathy is pretty huge. Okay, empathy plus pause. I'll put pause as a nice way to say it, but really, I'll give you an example. You will pick up the phone, talk to a decision maker, share the issue, and they will react with some level of emotion. Okay, they may go, oh yes, that is a huge problem we're dealing with right now. We've tried to put a few resources towards it. We haven't really figured it out, right? And instead of just jumping right into, okay, let's talk about that, you need to respond to that person and empathize with them. It makes a huge impact when you say, I hear you, instead of just jumping into your questions, right? It's here's the formula for it. It's really simple, and you think this is easy, but you ask a question, you move in to hear the answer, and a lot of people will just create a loop right here and keep going, ask, answer, ask, answer, ask, answer, and they're going to turn into some interrogator and not necessarily a consultant or having a conversation. So you got to break that loop and you need to respond. Okay. And some of the best ways to initially respond if someone shares emotion that you feel from them is to share that with them and say, oh man, that sounds like a big hassle. That sounds like it's really frustrating. And then shut up. You would be surprised at what a little bit of awkward silence does after empathy. And you know what? Just as a note, this is how we talk to people, period. This is not just the sales process. This is having a genuine conversation with another human. That's what I'm teaching right now. Okay. So if somebody walks up to you and says, man, I had a bad day today, it's like, okay, let's practice the discovery process. Right. And we walk through and we go, okay, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. That's gotta suck. And you just sit there and they go, it does suck. And they come closer to you and they engage and they start sharing their emotions more. Right. And so that's what this empathy with a pause does for you, is people, if you hit the emotion right on, if you are aligned with the same emotion that they had, they're going to be like, that's right. And you're going to hear it elevate a little bit, and they're going to share more, right? They're going to open up and talk more. If you still have someone that's reserved, right? There's a couple other things you can do with this. One, while you're in your questioning about process, we're going to front load some of those questions with these two phrases. One of them is, help me understand. Okay. Help me understand is really powerful. Okay. If I ask somebody, I've done this so many different times in both these ways, is if I say, can you tell me how many people are involved in the process? I'll get 4, 3, 7, whatever it is, right? Just one quick answer. If I say, you know what, help me understand how many people are involved in the process, 80% of the time I will get, well, it starts with Henry, and Henry does this with it, and then it moves over to Sally, and Sally, she's actually going to go through, and I get a story. I don't just get a number, right? Because it feels like when I front load things with help me understand, they're like, all right, I'm gonna have to teach this guy. And I can't teach with one word. And so I'm gonna have to tell a little bit more. Okay. Also, people will give you very open-ended answers instead of, it's the opposite of the open-ended question, it's the open-ended answer. They will say a lot, a long time. And it's like, that doesn't mean anything to me. Like, tell me a little bit more about that. Why do you say that? What does that mean to you? What does a lot mean to you? You need to get specific answers to things when you're asking questions. Yes, Matt.
Yeah, it might be a little early, but what kind of, what's your experience? Are we going to get 1 out of 10 of these things moving forward? What should the goal be, right? Like with these conversations, we know in the first 5 minutes, right? And then, kind of what's the industry's kind of conversion rate, especially kind of for founders, right? Because we're like Ritu said, right? We're bringing new product that's probably disruptive to market. So, is 1 out of 20 look like success, in your experience?
So there's 2 different metrics I think you're talking about, and I want to make sure I'm clear with the direction I'm giving you in this area. So one is, who am I going to be able to get on the phone? How many calls is it going to take to be able to get through to set a meeting with somebody? That's one, where I would say in your case, it's probably going to be more like anywhere between 75 and maybe even up to 150 calls before you're ever going to set a meeting. And that would be like the average. And then we start moving backwards when we start perfecting things better. And we're hoping for more like, okay, we'll get down to that 50 calls, 60 calls, and I set a meeting, right? However, if you get somebody on the phone and you're in the middle of a conversation from someone saying, yes, I have that pain, it's usually like a 1 in 5. Okay? Like you make 50 calls to talk to 5 people, you set 1 meeting. That's kind of that's what we're striving for, right?
Good. No, you're not going to be like, what's the desperate, what's the, hey, I'm losing hope here, I've called 200 people and or wow, we're doing really great, we're getting 1 out of 20 or something like that. So no, that's helpful.
Yeah, don't give up right away, because the first part of it is going to be the toughest. It takes about 45 days of a consistent process to really get into your groove and see the numbers start to align in a better way. Okay. And so if you're persistent with your process and you're doing things each day to move someone along, you're not missing days and you're not deprioritizing the prospecting effort. If you're doing that, it should take about 45 days for you to hone in on what messaging is working the best and getting your numbers right. And you'll be like, okay, I got this. I feel like I've got a rhythm. I know my numbers. I'm on it. Okay, now it's just about trying to tweak it a little bit here and there.
Thanks.
Okay.
And then sorry, just a follow on to that one, I keep coming back to comp. So how do you keep SDRs motivated for those 45 days when there are no meetings happening, so to speak? And not that not happening at all, but not enough happening for their commission to kick in.
Yeah. I think you need to set expectations really well in the beginning with an SDR as they join. You have to be able to say that here's where we are. This is the process. If you follow this process, you should be in good shape within 45 days and feeling really comfortable. I don't expect you to get this right away. It's going to take a little bit for you to move down this path. And so we're going to be here to support you along that way to get there. Right. But I don't think anybody expects to step into a job and master it within a week and be like, I know this, woo, I'm making a lot of money. And it's like, you have to develop, you have to understand, and that it's going to take time for you to develop and work through that process. Okay.
But that is what salespeople think they can do. Like, oh, I have done this before. I can do it again. I have X years of experience. Oh my God, I'm on day 8. Why nobody's answering the call? Or I called people and why I'm not getting a demo, and they're getting frustrated on day 8.
Yeah, any good salesperson will not be in that category. They will understand that it takes the time to execute down that path to get what they need. Okay, it's the people that are overly confident and saying, hey, I know everything about this and I don't have to learn and study and work. It's like, no, you don't think that when you walk in the door. People like that come into our program don't make it. They don't make it.
By the way, just for the record, that's a lot of pressure on the founder.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the conversation I told them. I said, look, I have pressure from investors. I don't want pressure from my internal team that you are getting finicky because you are not able to make commission on day 8 of your joining.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It is. It's a challenge. That one of the roles that is the hardest to find a quality person for is the SDR role, because it is so early in the process. If someone has over a year of experience in that position, they're ready to move on. And so if you try to hire somebody with experience, it's like, why do you have 2 years of SDR experience and you're willing to take another SDR role? Is that because you're mediocre? Is that because you're not really good at this? Is that, you got to really find the unique person that just wants to be the SDR. And then if you hire somebody with no experience, you have to work to develop them. And they might find out, they might determine, I don't like this, and they walk away, right? So it's a really hard role to fill, It's again, it is the thing that triggered us to do what we're doing right now, is training those folks so that we can help people find good quality folks that they don't have to deal with that problem anymore. So, okay. All right, one other little tactic that we want to talk about down here, one other phrase outside of help me understand, is one I just used, is tell me more. Okay. The caveat with this one is that it needs to start with a level of empathy too. And empathy is probably the wrong word, but it has to be like when someone shares something with you, you can't just go, oh, tell me more about that. It's like, oh, that's interesting. I'm curious. Tell me more about that. Help me. And instead of just flat out saying, tell me more, it's really trying to go, oh, I'm really curious about this part of it. Tell me a little bit more about that. Instead of saying something very like, tell me why you're doing this piece, it's more, just tell me more about that. And what happens in the person's mind is usually that they say, okay, what are the important things that I want to tell this person? And they focus on telling you what they think is important about it. And it also gives you a little bit of time to think while they're getting some of this stuff out. Okay, so just a couple of things to help you get through process. And what we're looking for, again, is we want to walk through the entire process until we get to emotion. What I hear from people all the time is, hey, Dan, how long should a discovery call take? What's the optimal time we should have somebody on the phone? Well, the optimal time is when somebody gets pretty emotional about the problem. That's it. That could happen within 1 minute. That could happen within 15 minutes. Average time that people are on the phone in a discovery is about 7 minutes. Okay, but that's, remember, if you weren't part or haven't seen the previous sessions, we had another funnel we talked about, and this was the buyer, right? This is the buyer stages of where they are in their buying process. And we talked about awareness, consideration, decision, and buy. And the farther down in that, the greater their emotion is. Okay, it helps you to identify where somebody is when you call them. Okay, when you share an issue and they go, yeah, I guess so, they may be right here, no emotion. And that means we're really going to have to dig in deep and get them to open up and really see the problem. Or you may get somebody here where they're like, oh my God, we've been talking about for the last 6 months. I've researched a lot of companies with really struggling with this. We've already identified it. Like, whoa, that discovery call, that might take like that. You know, you start into the process a little bit, they share, they unload completely on you because they've been thinking about it like crazy. And you're like, I can help you. And we move on. Okay. But it all depends on your prospect and where their mind is and how you can move them through. Okay. The other thing to think about, this is the last thing I'm going to talk about process, but there's a lot I'm throwing at you here, but problems resist, or issues exist in different buckets, right? So when we were talking about this example, if they have a problem with their conversion numbers and they say, man, we use a ton of different sources and all of them, I'm like weeding through a bunch of people and I struggle a lot in that area. I can't convert people at a high rate. Well, we may not even have to talk about report because we got to the significant part of the problem. Okay, we don't start there, but we have to start at the beginning and move through the process till we get to the biggest pain. When we get to the biggest pain, that person's going to open up the most, they're going to be the most emotional, and that's where we move in and close. Yes.
So
I felt a question coming.
yeah, yes, it was funny. You read my mind or my face. There is a textbook sales and there's reality. I'm sure we all here are smart enough to understand what you're saying is like, yes, makes sense. Yes, makes sense. Yes, makes sense. Right? We
Yes.
all are probably higher in EQ and IQ. When we are talking real life, I know college on K12 school side, there's a lot more similarities. They're more similar than different. On college side, what if your market is each university or college is a snowflake? And we try to do a lot of this check, discovery, blah, 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 empathy, all of that stuff. Still somewhere there's a failure. When I say failure, meaning it's not leading to the sale. I'm just crunching. It's like, okay, yes, it's like, yes, you're preaching to the choir to some extent. I absolutely love putting this on in this diagram and having this conversation. How do you make it a reality? Like, how do you go from that to actually getting a check? And we have gotten check. It's not like we don't have any checks, but the process varies so much from organization to organization. Not only it's personal human change, but it's the organizational change. You go all the way till the back where people are dying to have your product, and then, like you said in the beginning, either you get ghosted or you hear back, oh, sorry, we're not going to move forward.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about the entire process through all of these conversations, so you can see the little roadblocks and the challenges throughout the thing. But you know, this process does not change in any way from organization to organization to company to product to product. If you follow this process, you will have better outcomes. It won't be, it's not like this is the silver bullet, do this and everybody buys from you. It's still, you have odds you're dealing with, right? And you have people in different stages of their buying process. And some people you're not going to convince. You know, like I said, 1 in 5 people that you talk to that says, I have this exact problem is going to say yes to you. That's still you failing the majority of the time, right? But you've got to remember, it's odds. You know, these are my odds, know my numbers. And if I meet these numbers, I'm going to feel confident that what we're doing is right. Now, if 1 in 50 people that says, I have this problem, but I'm not interested in your product, well, then we have a problem, you know? But you're never going to get to a point that you are going to win more than you're going to lose. Never. Okay? Ever.
That's a good way to put it. And that's probably the hard reality.
Yeah. I mean, an incredibly great close rate for outbound cold calling is 25%.
That's not bad. I'll take 25 right now.
Right. So, I mean, but that means 75% of the time you're failing after someone said, cool, I like your product. Right. I mean, so that's just the cold reality of what sales really is that numbers. We have to understand them, and we have to like just let go of the feeling that perfection is what we need. It really is about going, how can I just improve and help these numbers get a little bit better, knowing that I'm just going to fail more than I'm going to succeed, period. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, and solution selling, right, is it's per customer. It's a lot of effort, right? So, right, you fill the top of the funnel, right, is what we're talking about, right? And then as those more engaged people are there, right, that then you have a lot of work to do, right, to make sure you're understanding those things and customizing your solution to exactly, and the challenge I've had in the past is, oh, we love your platform, but wish it did XYZ, right? And then we get into, all right, well, now I'm not building a platform or a SaaS, I'm building a custom solution, and I'm eating the development cost to get the customer.
Right.
And that throws my roadmap off and all these other things. So it's such a hard balance, right? To be like, all right, yeah, we're going to meet 80, the 80-20 rule, right? We're going to meet 80% of your needs. And yes, maybe there's a custom engagement that we'll have to do down the road, right?
Yeah, and that's why it's so important on the front end of this thing is then when we talked in a couple of sessions ago, we talked about your ideal customer profile, right? Is that if we try to please everybody, our software is going to be at a point where it's not pleasing anybody because we're pissing everybody off because we're doing things that all these other people want. Like this one-off wants this and this one-off wants this, and it becomes harder to use and more cumbersome because there's so many things that it's trying to do. Nope. Let's focus on the people that we know we can help, and let's build it for them and really make it tight. And then maybe we'll do a little expanding later.
Well, that's just so emotionally hard when you've got that fish on the line and they're like, yeah, okay, yeah, we need this and we'll pay for it, but
yep, it's incredibly difficult. And one of the hardest things for an early stage founder to learn is the word no. That kind of changed my life when I was able to start saying no instead of taking on anybody and everybody who knocked on my door, because I was spread this thin and I was just like trying to help so many people that I couldn't build the business in the way that I saw it to be the best. And so when I finally learned how to say, well, you know what, no to this and this and this, and focus on these things, man, that brought in the revenue because I knew how to do that one perfectly. But you know what? We don't have to say yes to everybody.
So is there that's great, Dan. Is there a place in this discovery? Is there like some triggers that you've seen that are now like your red flags to be like, oh, all right, nope, this is going the wrong way. This is not, this is going to cause me more work than it's worth.
So when you walk through your process here and you're saying, here are the milestones I have to see. If you address a pain at the front end of the conversation that fits into this, that you can solve, you're done.
You're okay.
Don't worry about it. You're good. what comes up later in the process is when you get to the things like you run into, where someone says, man, this is nice, but can it do this too? And it's like, you know what? If you're willing to go to the 80%, I got you. If you need the rest, I can't help you unless you want to develop it for me. And I'll give you a bid for that.
Yeah.
So those are the type of things that we run into. But if we do a really strong discovery, we tend to eliminate some of those. And I think the thing that does the best job is being very narrow on our pain point or on our issue statements. If we know, hey, if they have this issue, I can kill it. So I'm going to call and just talk about that issue. And if they don't have it, I'm going to let them go for now. I'll come back to them with some other ones that are a little bit more vague, but let me just drill down on this one that I know I can kill.
Dan, is there something called a stale lead? And what I mean by that, we put them in our CRM, to be very blunt, say 4 years ago, 3 years ago, whatever. We did burst, drip, burst, drip. And are they tuning us out right now? Should we move away from that?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's going to be a lot of questions around that side of marketing to them and trying to drive some awareness about our product. If emails are not bouncing and they're not rejecting you, I would keep them in some kind of nurture program, and continue to keep the brand in front of them in a way that is more valuable to them, as opposed to a sales process, like pushing a demo. It's more about talking about the problem and sharing ideas and sharing your thoughts on it. Like, hey, we're the thought leader in this space. And your brand stays in front of them. So stale leads, yeah, I mean, those are going to be people that don't respond ever and don't ever engage with you, but you certainly can continue to communicate with them as your product develops and grows, and you end up gaining more clients that you can reference in their area and things of that nature.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. I lost you here for a second. Hate when that happens, but okay. So in the discovery process, we are now to the point where we've made it through the entire current state, and we go, you know what, I'm comfortable. I feel like I know how they do everything today, and what they've shared with me is a really good deviation from the ideal path. There's pain and I feel emotion behind that. So therefore, I want to see if they're ready to move forward. So the way that we do that is the next step in the process is we summarize. Okay, we summarize and we say, okay, so what I'm hearing from you is, and we reiterate what we just heard from them. And we very much highlight the struggle that they talked about. What we don't want to do in here is assume emotion or pain and put it in our words and say, well, because they said this, they really suck at this. However, if they said they really suck at that, we want to reiterate their words and say, what you were sharing with me is you do these steps and it really causes these problems. Am I accurate with that assessment? Did I hear you correctly? Okay. And so the key in the summarization part about it is validation. Okay. We need to ask the question at the end of the summary that says, did I get it right? Right. So we tell them all the things we heard, emphasizing the pain that they shared. And we go, is that accurate? Is that a good assessment of the conversation? And they're like, you got it. You're right. That's absolutely right. And what's unique about this conversation right now in the perspective of the prospect is they're going, this person just sat back and listened to my problem, didn't say anything about their product, asked if they understood me, and boy, did they get me. They get me, right? And in this section right here, from here all the way down through here, this is our no sell zone. Okay? We are not selling or talking about our product. We're not emphasizing the things that we do. We're just learning and caring about the other person. We're having a nice, good conversation, learning about the struggles that they're dealing with, what they might be frustrated with, and attempting to align those with our product. And when we summarize and we get validation from that, and they say, oh my gosh, yes, that's exactly what is the problem, then anything you say after that is going to hold a lot more weight. Does that make sense? Because you just told them, I know you. I get you. I understand exactly where you are. And they're like, yeah, right? And now it's like, okay, that gives us the opportunity to move into a recommendation. I need to come up with a smaller word for that. Recommendation. We need to recommend. That would be better. So at this point, we need to take the action of recommend. And the way that that sounds is it basically says when they say, yes, you're right. We said, well, then based on that, I am confident that we can solve your problem. And here's why. We share a little bit of our product, a high level of what it does to be able to align with their pain that they talked about. Right? So instead of saying, you know what, I can solve your problem, you want to check out what we do? It's like, wait a second, what do you do? Why do you think you can solve my problem? We got to give them a little bit of context. So we say, you know what, that problem is a really big problem. I'm sorry you're dealing with it, but I'm so confident right now, based on what I've heard from you, that what we have to offer can really help you move in a good way. And this is why I feel that way. We focus on, and you just share a high level of how your product solves the issue you just talked to them about, and move straight into setting a meeting. Okay? My product does these things that help solve that problem. So what I would recommend is that we take the next step in the process and actually show you how that does that. Okay, it's better to just sit down with somebody, walk through it, and see it live on how it actually solves those problems. So I've got some time open later today, later this week. How about Thursday afternoon? Do you have time later in Thursday afternoon? I've got a spot open at 3 o'clock. Does that work? That's what we're doing. Where people fail in this process is that they ask the question too early in this process. Okay, so they summarize and they say, yes, that's my problem. And the person says, oh my gosh, based on that, then I'm confident we can help you. Would you like to take a look at it? And it's like, wait a second. Shouldn't you know what I should do? Wait, I'm going to take the least amount of commit here as a prospect. And I'm going to say, why don't you just send me some information on what you're doing? And I'll see if it's a fit for me, and I'll talk to you never. And they'll walk away, right? That happens more often than not if you put the ask in the wrong spot. But if you act like the expert and you say, here's what we're going to do next, because I'm confident I can solve your problem and this will help you, what would happen next is we actually show you what this is all about. So do you have 60 minutes? We can sit down and talk about it later this week. And it's like, boom, done. This is what we need to do. Okay. There's a higher level of throughput when someone is that you help them make the decision and basically assume we're ready to move over. Okay.
Dan, what's the target time for this meeting? Is this a 30-minute meeting?
Usually it depends on your demo. It depends on how much time you need to share with them what it is. I would say the average time that we're setting is 1 hour.
Sorry, for this initial discovery meeting.
Oh, that's what I was talking about earlier.
Oh, okay.
There is no set window for it. It's just when this person gets emotional, we set a meeting. This next step. So I think maybe Matt, maybe I was misunderstanding what you're saying. What we're setting a meeting for after this discovery should be a presentation of your solution that fits their need.
Yep. So,
Okay.
But this initial discovery meeting, this discovery discussion, is that you know, if it's 45 minutes, is that too long, or we just let this thing go until, you know, they run out of breath?
It's 45 minutes, I would say, would be extraordinarily long for something like this.
Yeah.
I would say the longest it should go, or that it needs to go, is 15 minutes.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Got it.
You know, it's just a quick understanding of where they are. Are they willing to make change? Is it emotional enough for them to do something about it? Let's take a look at it. Okay. It's almost like if you ask, what would you like to do? Do you want to see a demo? Where do you want to go from here? It's like going to your doctor saying, I have a headache. They go through the diagnosis with you. And then at the end of it, they go, so what do you want to do about it? It's like, wait, you're the doctor. You need to tell me what to do about it.
Yeah.
Right. And so what we need to do is act like the experts, because we are. They don't buy software every day. We sell it every day. So let's talk about how we go through that process. The next step is going to be this. And it is not some, you know, the assumptive close is not some kind of Jedi mind trick. If they're not ready to go, they're not going to move forward. Right? You're not pushing someone to do anything. You're helping them make the right decision. If they say no, you're like, okay, maybe I can send you some information you can take a look at, and we compromise and we move on. But we set a meeting with them to attempt to review that information. Okay. The thing is that when you get a no, when you're making a recommendation, something went wrong up here. Okay. You went too fast. You didn't get enough emotion. You misunderstood them, right? You blew right past the validation, and you just said, hey, this is what I feel about you, so I'd like to set a meeting. And it's like, wait a second. Whoa, I didn't tell you that that's how I feel, right? So you have to analyze what went wrong in the front end, right? If you get a no.
Yeah, I know. I've just been on calls where the person will talk for 20 minutes, you know, about the first problem, right?
Yeah.
Which extends this into you know, like not the hour that I wanted it to be.
Yeah. I mean, you may get a talker on the phone, and someone who's willing to share their life with you, and then talks about their dog too. But the idea is to say, I just need to know these bits and bytes of information across the process to understand how you're doing it. And if they get emotional, stop the conversation and summarize about that point and see what you can do to set a meeting. What typically happens in your sales presentation is we do a little mini discovery on the front end, and say, hey, these are the things we learned about, anything missing, and then we move into our presentation, right? So I'll talk about that here in a minute in more detail. So like, see what we can do to focus on the real problem, and we can get deeper into it later when we start showing our product. Okay. Again, everything gets easier when you start the conversation with the right thing. Okay. So focusing in on a specific problem or issue, focusing in on two and having them select one, makes your conversation like this, like straight as an arrow, right on it. And that's what we focus on. When you say, tell me about your world, well, okay, you're getting into a painful conversation at that point. You're going to be there for a while. All right. That's what we want to do, is we want to understand what are the hot topics, big pains that I can solve that are going to trigger that emotion, and I'm going to drive down on that one. Okay. All right, so we've gotten through, we understood the current state, we summarized what we heard. They said, oh my gosh, yes. So we recommended, and we said, this is the next step. We gave them some choices, and we set a meeting. Okay. When we set that meeting, one of the most advantageous things to do at the end of that setting the meeting, by the way, we want to set the meeting as soon as possible. Don't go, what's 3 weeks from now look like for you? Nope, let's try to set the meeting in the same week or a couple days later, whatever. Okay. Fast, right? And then the thing that we're going to do at the end of it is we're going to say, okay, now that we got this set, is there anyone else besides yourself that we would want coming to this meeting as well? Does it make sense for anyone else to attend? Okay. If they talked about other people in the process, we mention those people's names. Should they be involved? Should we add them to the process? Right? So that helps decrease our sales cycle. It lets us speed up a little bit faster because we're getting in front of everybody. Okay, doesn't always happen. Hold on just 2 seconds. It doesn't always happen that way, right? But at least we're asking and attempting to go down that path. They may say, no, just me right now. Okay, so we need to do that at least. This whole thing is the discovery process, all right? Oh, did I have a question?
And before you raise any of that, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, before you move away, I want to take a snap, if that's okay.
I don't want to be in your picture.
Hold on. Okay, there it is. Hold on. Let me do that because my Zoom cutting. Okay, got it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Okay. So this is the entire process of the discovery. Okay. I mean, we identified an issue. We understood what their problem really is because we were able to open them up, talking through process. We summarized and said, man, we are accurate. This really is a problem for you. So we made a recommendation and we set a meeting. Okay. That's it in a nutshell. There's a lot of little things to talk about it. What I would focus on for you right now in order to develop this is focus on these buckets. Okay. Say, what is the typical process I'm going to hear from somebody, and where are the areas I know that I can really help? So if you were following along in previous ones, we were talking about messaging and persona and building out our pains and our issues, statements, and things of that nature. We got a script ready. When I share that issue, where does it fall in here? And where is the typical problems that happen so that I can have this conversation smoothly and identify the biggest gap? Okay? All right, let me erase this mess and let's talk about sales presentation, because now we set an appointment with them. We set an appointment and it's like, okay, shoot, now what do we do? How do we make sure or ensure that we get the best results out of this presentation and make sure that when we get to the end, our close rate is really high? How do we do all the things that'll help us not have this person run away? Okay, so I want to talk about sales presentations, and I have some strong feelings on certain things, so I may offend some people who are presenting in a certain way, but let me talk about what a sales presentation looks like, and we're going to talk about it in a similar way, beginning, middle, and end. Okay, so at the beginning, we have, how do we start the conversation? Okay, then we're going to really talk about the body of it, and that is really the presentation side, the prezo, or we can call it our demo. Okay, what goes on during that part of it, and then how do we wrap things up in the best way possible so that we know we're going to continue to engage with this person and that they're going to continue to move down the sales funnel with us, or we know this is not a good fit and we're moving on and not wasting our time. Okay, because there are going to be people that come into your funnel that say, yes, I'd like to see it, and then you share it with them and it's not a good fit. Okay, we don't want to then try to pressure and keep pushing them to buy from us and wasting a lot of energy. We want to pivot and focus our energy where we know it's going to be worthwhile. Okay, so let's talk through the beginning process. There's a lot of steps in beginning the sales presentation. Okay, the first thing we want to think about is intros. Okay, intros. We want to be able to make sure we don't skip this part, because if we are saying to that one person that we met with, who besides yourself needs to be involved in this meeting, and they bring 3 more people, we've never talked to those people. We don't know their roles. We don't know who they are. We don't know what their challenges might be, right? And so we want to understand who are the people in the room and what are their roles. Okay, so a very easy beginning to this is let's just do a quick round of introductions. I'll start. Let me tell you who I am. For the people that don't know, this is me, bloop, okay? And then we move around the room and we get introductions done, okay? Based on the personas you built out, you should have a better idea of function and problem and issues that they might be having. And so you can address the right people during the conversation, okay? Then the next thing we want to do is we want to share an agenda. Okay. All right. In the first part about this, it is so important to make sure that everybody has the right expectation of what this meeting is going to be about. Okay. We want to make sure they know what they're going to get, what they're getting themselves into right away. Okay. And it kind of starts like this. It's like, okay, I've got 60 minutes. Is everybody still good with that? Does anybody have a hard stop that we need? And it's like, oh, I do. I've got to leave. Okay, great. I'll make sure we wrap right at 60 minutes. Okay. I won't take any extra time with this. Let's walk through a little bit of the agenda and what I plan to be talking about. I mean, it's like, boom, 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 boom. Is everybody good with that? Does everybody feel comfortable with that's the steps we're going to take through this? Yes. Okay. And then the last part of our conversation is just setting up for the end of the meeting. Okay, so I really just call this my setup. Okay, and there's two components to this that are really important. One, I tell people it's okay to say no and be done with me in the middle of this. Okay, I say, okay, during this conversation at any point, I want you guys to be asking questions and everything else. I want this not to be a monologue. So please ask questions through this. I want you to get the most out of it. However, if during this conversation you learn something that makes this feel like it's not going to be a good fit for you, please stop me, let me know. I don't want to waste your time. We should be able to be in. And I'm going to do the same thing. If you're sharing things with me that I feel like this might not be a good fit, I'm going to stop and I'm going to let you know that so we don't waste each other's time. Is that fair? Are you okay with doing that? Right? That sets you up for the next conversation in here where we're setting up the end. Once they say okay to that, I follow that up and say, okay, well, based on that, if we get to the end of this and everybody still feels comfortable, we're solving problems, this feels like a good, we'd like to continue. What I'd like to do is just reserve 10 minutes at the end of this meeting to be able to talk about next steps, how it is that you buy something like this, just walk through a process conversation with you if you don't mind. Is that fair? I have never had anybody say no to that. They're all like, cool, yeah, sure, that sounds good, no problem. They're not, and what that does is it locks in 10 minutes at the end of the meeting and everybody knows that when the presentation is over, we're going to be talking about this stuff. We're going to be talking about next steps. And the biggest challenge, like I was saying earlier for people, is that when you get to the end of your presentation, they're like, okay, cool, that was great. I got to go. I'll see you later. And they don't reserve the time to talk to you about next steps, and we can't set a meeting. Does that make sense for everybody? So make sure you're at least a step in some way, shape, or form saying, can we have a little time at the end to talk about next steps? If it makes sense to continue the conversation, we ought to be talking about next steps. So let's reserve a moment to do that. Okay, that conversation can be part of your agenda conversation where you're just saying, here are the things we're going to be doing. And this is, we can have a little agenda slide. We don't need an agenda slide. We can just talk about it in general. So it's up to you on how you do it. Some people will just say, I have no slides. I'm just going to present my solution. And we're just going to talk. Some people will have slides and then a demo of their solution and then slides. However you want to do it, it's not as important as the content of what's coming out of your mouth. Okay? Whatever makes you comfortable in how you do things. So let's talk about the order of that content, because that's really important. Okay? One of the things that people make a mistake on is they put all of their credibility at the front end of the conversation. So when they get into that, they go, all right, let me tell you all about us for a minute. I'm going to tell you how we got started. I'm going to tell you about how many clients we have. I'm going to tell you all about us. Matter of fact, here's a picture of our office. And here's a picture of all of our employees. And then guess what? Here's a picture of the dog in our office. And it's like, oh my gosh, these people are sitting there like that going, when are we going to get to the solution? And you just lost all of your credibility because no one's listening. No one's caring about you until they go, ooh, this is a good solution. Okay. And so the first thing we have to avoid having that at the front end. The number one thing we start our presentation with is issues. Okay. If you like slides, if you like to do this with slides, I personalize this slide and I put the things that they talked about in the discovery conversation right front and center. And I say, this is based on our conversation previously, and these are the things we talked about. You're struggling in this area, you need a little bit of help in here, here's how you do some of the other stuff. And what we're hoping to accomplish today is to see how we solve all these problems, right? Because guess what? Remember, people buy based on emotion. And so it's our job at this point to get them back into emotional state. Let's trigger that stuff for a minute. Let's do a little mini discovery with the people that were not there and say, is that accurate? Anything else you want to share? Is there anything different about this? Are you hoping to get anything more out of this? Are these the main issues that you're dealing with? Did I get this right? Right? And if we do that on the front end, they're all like, oh yeah, this is the big problem. And they're all set and ready to receive the solution now. Okay? This shouldn't take more than 5 minutes. It's just a little front end thing. Maybe for the more complex, and we had 4 more people join, it might turn into a 15-minute conversation, but it should be a little front end mini discovery conversation. We're just reminding them of the pain they're currently in and why they're meeting with us. Okay? Does that make sense? And then the next thing that we move into is what they all came to see, which is the solution. Okay? We get as fast as we can into the solution. Now, if you're brand new, which is a lot of people have, like, they're bringing something crazy new to the environment. It is not something that is a mature market in any way. There is an opportunity to do a little bit of credibility on the front, but don't load it up in any way. It's just like, here's our mission. This is what we're trying to accomplish. Now let's move into our solution. Okay. Something small to just give them the context of you. And then we move into the solution. Okay. The solution conversation does not need to be a monologue. That is a big problem for folks, is that they go, okay, ready? And they just start talking and they share a bunch of information without letting anybody get a word in edgewise. They move through the entire solution and then they go, what did you think? The way that it should look is we go, okay, now let's talk about the product. Remember this issue? Let's walk through how we do that. Remember what you told me about this issue? You said this is how you kind of walk through that. Is that correct? Okay, let me show you how that would be different with us. And then we validate and say, does that feel like it would be easier for everybody? Does that feel, we're getting feelings back from them going, ooh, this is good, right? Did I hit on everything? Did I miss anything in that part? Okay, let's go to the next issue. And it's basically like, we're just teeing them up, knocking them down, teeing them up, knocking them down. Yes, Jordy.
Yeah, in this part, when you go over the issues, how do you handle the situation where you have spoken to someone who has set up the meeting and his or her perception of the issues is different to the new people that he brought to the meeting? And when you go over the issues, you put them in the defensive, right? Because they feel threatened, right? You're not doing things well, right? That could happen, right? How do you handle that?
There's a potential for that, where you have like a department head who brought in an IT person, And the IT person's defensive because there's a solution that's coming in to solve a challenge. And so in order to better understand, you have to spend time in this issue conversation with the new people to get their mindset, to get them in the right place. Okay. So, I mean, at least get your head understanding where they are with it. Okay. Because you can unknowingly offend somebody because of the fact you didn't spend enough time learning where they are with it. But when you get into the solution and they're like divergent like that, we have to call that out and say, now here's part of what we wanted to show you, but in your experience, this is what's happening. In your experience, this is what's happening, and get them to have a little bit of a conversation for a minute, then show them the solution. Okay. Because you might get a little bit of compromise, or you might get a little bit from that conversation, and then you can lead that into how you solve that. Okay. And you might be able to, like, this is how it's going to help you, and this is how it's going to help you, and address it to the specific people. Okay. It's hard to know exactly how to solve your issue when it comes up, unless I know kind of the situation that is very specific to an event that happened, and to be able to answer that question, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. So again, I think a couple of key points in this is make sure that your solution is very focused on their issues. I've seen a lot of people do demos that are very cookie cutter. They build a demo deck and they run through the demo deck. They don't even care what that person's problems are. They just run through it, hoping that the person is going to see and connect the dots on their own. And it's your job in this presentation to go, here's the dot, here's the connection, here's the dot, here's the connection, right? You got to be doing that. And you certainly can have a deck or a presentation that structurally is the same every time. However, you're just emphasizing things a little bit different along the way to tailor it to that person. Okay, we talk about the same things, but we focus heavily and we emphasize areas, and we personalize it to them. Okay. Also, eliminate the stuff that doesn't really matter. Okay. If it's not solving their problem, or if it's not some wow that they're seeing, then we don't need to show them, what the login page looks like, or how to add a user, or things of that nature. That can come later if they want to see any of that. Okay, let's focus in on their problems. Okay, once we get done with the solution and we've said, okay, we've solved the problem, we've knocked everything down, the next thing we move into is, this is where we start adding some of the credibility, but it comes in the form of implementation. Okay. Implementation. Okay, so if you are selling a software, one of the biggest challenges that is kind of universal across the board with all institutions is like, are my employees going to use this? Are my teachers going to adopt it? How hard is it going to be to get this set up? Right? And if you don't tackle that right away, and you are being reactive to that question, it means that you haven't put a plan together in their mind, right? And so if you're able to proactively put in front of them, hey, it's an easy 1, 2, 3, ABC, get it set up, and this is how we do it. This is how we focus to make sure that all your teachers are adopting this. If you walk through a structured plan for implementation, they're going to walk away feeling so much better about the process, because they're like, these guys have thought through how this actually needs to be implemented in order for it to be the most effective. Okay. So it's better if you have 3 steps, ABC, 1, 2, 3. It's very nice, lay it out, and it makes it simple for people. Okay. And then the last thing that we do is we add our credibility at this point. Okay, sound it out. I don't even know. At this point, it really is, this is where people have already said, okay, now I've seen it. This has kind of made me excited. I'm now very focused on you because I'm excited about this solution. It sounds great. It sounds easy. And now we're talking about, yeah, we've put it in these other school districts. We've had these results. As the more credibility you can add, and not like 6 slides of all these different things, but the more focused credibility you can add, this is the first time we really want to talk about things because they're more receptive to that. Okay. All right. That's the order of the body of it, is where we go: issue, solution, how do we implement, and why are we the best? Okay. Once we get in at the end of this is where our 10 minutes comes in. Okay. And so we basically just say, all right, that's the content that I have. And if you don't have any other questions for me, what I'd like to talk about right now is what next steps look like. This seems to be a really great fit for what you guys are dealing with today based on the conversation we've had today. So, let's just talk about what it takes to implement something like this on your end. What does it take to kind of buy something like this? And the way that we start with this is we start at the end. Okay. And a lot of software sales is about go live dates, right? When do you want this to be in the hands of the teachers, students, whatever it is? When do you want this to be live and ready to be used? Ideally, is there a target date? Is there something that, well, ideally we'd like to have it ready by December 1st. And now we just walk backwards and we talk about all the things that are involved in dealing with this. Okay, so, and we go, okay, well, December 1st, implementation we talked about is about 30 days. So we're gonna have to push that back to November 1st for a signing date. So kind of the latest we're gonna need to have an agreement in place is around November 1st. So let me write that down. But ideally, we wanna have things signed by November 1st. Let's talk about what it takes to sign an agreement. Let's talk about, so who's involved? What are the steps? We got to get it in front of the board, or we have to do this. And when's the meeting for this? Oh, we got to get together with our group and talk about it. We need references. It's going to have to get in front of legal. And talking through that with people is like, I never thought about all the things that it's going to take to buy. So just a little story about this. About halfway through my career in EdTech, or a little bit earlier than that, this was presented as an idea for us and said, man, you need to be doing this. And I was like, why are we doing that? Like, this is stupid. I don't want to walk through all this stuff with people, and they're not going to take the time to do that. And well, you wouldn't, when I started implementing something like this, you wouldn't believe the gratitude that I got after I sent a project plan to somebody after this call. Being able to walk through that was like, I never thought about all the things that were really involved in this, and you made me think through it. And I understand they're talking about urgency now. What a project plan does for somebody is it gets them out of their head of just trying to focus on what's going to work, and they focus on what it's going to take to get it set up. And they don't think about that right then. And when you make them focus on that, they're like, holy crap, I wanted this by December. I was just going to sign something in November 15th and we're going to be good. Like, wait a second, like I got to go back. I got stuff to do right now. And it drives urgency. Okay. So we fill out this little project plan. Everybody's going to be unique. The way that mine looks is it's a little Excel spreadsheet basically that's branded to us. And it has all the steps listed down, and I fill in the dates when we expect them to be done. And I put whose responsibility it is to do those things. I do not build that in the meeting. I just talk through it without saying I'm building a project plan. I just say, let's talk about how this works. When we get to the end of that conversation, the last thing we're talking about is what's next. And it's, well, we need to see a price. That's the first thing we're going to do. So I'm going to put together a proposal. I want to get that in your hands. I think the best thing to do next is really just, let's set a time to review that. And then we can move forward with the rest of the steps. Right? That's the first milestone on our list. Let's get it done. What's a good date for us to sit down and review that? We can get together next week if that works for you. How's Monday? And we're setting a time. Okay. One of the most important things that we have to remember about the sales process is this term. It's called BAM FAM. Okay. This is one of the most important things that you need to do during every meeting. It is book a meeting from a meeting every time. Okay. You have to make sure you're reserving time on their calendar at the end of every meeting. Do not accept, call me in a week, okay? Or do not accept someone saying, well, we need some time to think about it. Don't know when we're going to get together. Why don't you check back with us in a couple of weeks and we'll see where we are. Don't accept some arbitrary, non-calendar based response. This is what happens with sales reps. They have a great demo. The person's responding so positively. They're very excited. And they're like, this is amazing. I'm so glad we had a chance to visit with you and see this. We're going to all get together. We're going to talk about what we're going to do next. And then why don't you call us in 2 weeks and we'll move from there. And they say, great. Okay, I'll see you later. And they hang up the phone with no commitment whatsoever. They call them in 2 weeks. They don't answer. And then 3 weeks go by. And then 4 weeks go by. And all of a sudden, another priority has come over the top of your priority. And you keep getting pushed farther and farther down. And they go, I don't have time for that anymore. And they ghost you. What we need to be doing in every single meeting is being able to say, all right, this is what we're doing next. This is the time we're going to do it. Now, some people are not going to show to meetings. That's what happens. And some people are going to push back on you and say, wait, I don't know if I'm ready to set a time for this meeting. We'll say, let's just put a time on the calendar. And if we need to move it, it's totally fine to move. But what I have found is that when we don't get something on the calendar, it seems to just drag. And what we just talked about is ideally you'd like to get it set up on this date. And if we don't put something on the calendar, it feels like we're just going to have a really hard time reconnecting. So why don't we just pencil in 10 minutes as a check-in in a week and see where you are? That way we each know that we're going to be able to get connected with each other. If they don't accept that, chances of them being interested in your product at that moment is almost zero. Okay? They're just trying to be polite and saying, we're going to think about it. Talk to you later. Okay? If you can't set a meeting with somebody, the chances you're going to close them unless their excuse is incredibly valid, that's them just saying no. Okay? Does that make sense to everybody? We have to, if they push back, you push back once. Only once. You don't have to annoy the crap out of them with trying to tell them, we need a meeting. Like if they don't accept it after the second pushback and making it a really light ask, that's them saying, you know, I don't know if I'm interested. Okay. Once you've set the meeting, you create a little summary email and say, really appreciate the time today. It was great to talk. Here's the things we talked about. Next step, we're going to be meeting on this day. Matter of fact, here's a copy of a little project plan I put together based on our conversation, just so that we have an easy reference to talk about what the next steps are as we go through this buying process. Looking forward to meeting with you next. Have a wonderful day. Send it out, right? That's where I have received so much response of, wow, this is great. Thank you for taking the time to put this together. This was really helpful. Really appreciate it. I would have never thought I would have gotten stuff like that. I would be like, whatever, you know, but these folks they haven't thought through the process like that. And you're kind of organizing your thoughts with them and their thoughts, their plan. And so during the next meeting, we pull the project plan out and we go, okay, it says next step is this. Let's get that time on the calendar. We book a meeting. And then we book another one until we close the deal. Yes, Michael.
Do you separate the proposal and the plan?
Meaning the proposal and the presentation itself?
After we do a presentation, I love it. You follow up with me, you send a proposal saying, this is how much it'll cost. You want to start on this date. Is that nice little pretty PDF or something separate as a document? Then here's your spreadsheet with who's doing what and when.
It is. It is totally separate, and it's a line item on the spreadsheet.
Got
You
it.
know,
Thank you.
the line item is deliver proposal. Next one is this decision. Next one, you know, and we're walking through that.
And so if
Right.
you follow up with me, do you send both of those? Or you just send the proposal to start to say, hey, let's just see if this is.
I send a summary right off the bat with the plan, and then I never resend the plan. I just keep pulling it back out during the next meeting. I just like, oh, let me share my screen. Here's where we are. Here are the dates. Okay, let's work. And they're like, okay, cool. And we just set the meeting based on that. And so it gives me a good visual to throw in front of them and say, let's walk through this again. Next thing on the line is this.
And you just refer to the proposal linked in the plan every time. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So when it comes to proposals too, and pricing and things like that, people have very varying opinions on when to share pricing, how to share pricing. It's very dependent on your product, your solution itself. You could have a very straightforward pricing that in your presentation at the end, we're throwing pricing out in front of them. This is how it works. This is what we're doing. Boom. Right? If your product is a little bit more complex and it takes a little effort to put together a proposal for them, then I would put that into a different meeting and actually go, let's walk through it together. And then you have your variations in between. You can be like, oh, let me send you something. You send it and you meet about it later. Okay. So what fits you the best is really something I can't really solve for you right now unless I knew exactly about your product and all the pieces of the puzzle there. But it can go anywhere from here's my presentation and pricing is the last thing I share, or it can go all the way to you're not even sharing it until you're sitting down in the next meeting walking through it with them. Okay. Okay. I got through everything. We still have about 10 minutes left. So if anybody has any additional questions, happy to field more questions, or you are more than welcome to bail and go get some lunch. Depending
And I
on
have a question / proposal for you, maybe.
okay.
Maybe, one thing that will be great, I know that will be helpful for us, like you looking through watching a video of one of our demo recording or this discovery and presentation and give feedback. You did this right and you sucked at this. You should have done this, you should have done that, stuff like that.
I love criticizing. No, I'm just kidding. I love critiquing other people and telling them how bad they did. No, I'd be happy to help out in that area. I mean, if you want to connect one off and we can talk through how I can help, and I'd be really happy to see how it's going and give you some feedback on it. Totally.
That'll be lovely. And other question I had was, we talked about discovery and presentation as two separate things. So what we have found, and again, know in a context that I'm a very impatient perfectionist founder. I want to be $1 billion today or yesterday, right? So with that context, we make calls when we get a demo. We call it a demo and initial discussion, and we do both of them in one. And you're absolutely right. We spend 7 to 10 minutes in discovery. We send those 3 or 4 questions beforehand. What are the challenges? What are the tools you are using? And then what is something that you're in particularly looking out to get out of this conversation? So that level of high level thinking going.
Can I ask you a quick question on that?
Yes.
Those are inbound leads? Someone
No.
raises their hand, or is it you called them and talked to them?
We call them.
Okay, so that's cold. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so it is cold, or let's say SDR or whoever is calling, and they have little bit of conversation about discovery, probably on the phone. I don't hear every call. And then when we get the demo, we say 2 days before that, hey, here's what some of the questions we would love to answer, get the answers to. If you get to them before, great. If not, we will discuss in the meeting. If nothing else, I think they're starting to think about that. We get into the meeting, and we usually have, our thinking is like, oh my God, these people are so busy, or whatever, I'm the only one idle in the world. They all are very busy. So we'll take, if we get one meeting with them, that itself is success. So we spend 7-10 minutes on discovery, then we jump into the presentation, close with next steps. We don't necessarily get the next meeting set up, but we do have next steps sort of finalized. Is that right, wrong? It depends. What is the answer here? Because we think second 2 meetings is like stretching our luck with them.
Well, I would say everything was sounding great until you got to the, I don't know what next steps are at the end of that. It should be that you have that you should say, okay, this is exactly what we do next. And if you feel like what's happening in your presentation is people are going, amen, I want it. Or if they're going, okay, there's a process that we have to go through to buy it. That's what the whole project plan is built to do, is to define what the next steps look like. And so each one is going to be a little bit unique as a university to say they need to do these things. And so you have to be able to say, okay, sounds like this is a really good fit and could help you a lot, right? Yes. Okay, let's talk about what it looks like to buy. Everybody's a little bit unique. We want to make sure we're focused on what you need. Let's walk through that. When would you like to have something like this in place? Oh, as soon as possible. Okay, let's put, boom, this date. And then we just walk through the conversation. And you should walk away from that meeting incredibly clear about what are the next 4, 3, 7 steps that you have to take to do that. And sometimes that's going to take, well, we got to get this in front of the bigger person or the higher up person or somebody else, or we got to share it with the lower level folks in a bigger meeting. Whatever needs to happen, you walk through those steps with them and we're done.
So we do talk about next step, but it's usually like, okay, can I touch base with you in 1 week and see where you are, or have an update? Will you talk to your VP? Sometimes it's like, okay, I need to talk to my boss. That's fine. So we don't set the next meeting. We do talk about next steps, but not the whole project plan. I think I like the idea where you say, this is when you would want this product to be in your hands. What do we need to do? Backtrack from there. That part we have not done. But I think that can be very fruitful, both for them and us.
Yes, you need to do that. Absolutely need to do that. And that will establish, and you have to walk away from the meeting with the meeting. You cannot accept them going, well, I'm going to talk to my boss. We'll touch base with you in a week. No. If it's a week that you need, then I will call you on Monday at 2:00. Does that work for you? It doesn't matter that meeting is not like, that meeting is a check-in to say, did you talk to your boss? If they say, well, I'm going to have to get and talk to my boss. When's your next meeting with your boss? Okay, it's on Thursday. How about I call you Thursday afternoon after that's done? We'll see if there's a reason to move forward. 10 minutes on the calendar, boom, done. We're off to the races. Like, you can't walk away from that meeting without another meeting booked. You're gonna string out your sales process weeks and months if you don't do that. So the project plan allows you to do that in a much easier way. Everything else is solid.
Right.
From your description.
Okay.
Matt? Yes, sir. I know we have a hard stop right at the top of the hour or so.
Yeah, first of all, Dan, I just want to thank you for all of these sessions, man. It's super thankful for your time and insight. I'm sure I speak for all of us here, but a round of applause here for Dan. For Dan, just super amazing. Anything in this presentation, like slides, or that you would avoid, or that you've kind of put in and you're like, that doesn't work, or okay, yeah, the logo slide doesn't work anymore, or I think it's more, I care a lot about the order of operation and not necessarily the full level of what a slide looks like or how many slides it takes to get that out.
It's more of saying, if you do it in this order, you are going to have much greater success on the back end. And that's the important part about it. How you present those ideas is not as much as important, or whether or not you put a logo in this corner or that corner, or the slide is too rich with words. It really is just about your personal preference. Put it in this order. You'll get it better and better as you go along.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. I know we're coming up on the top of the hour. I know we have a hard stop, so I'll just appreciate you all joining in and being as interactive as you are. I love the fact that we're getting into tons of questions, because it helps us expand the content a little bit more and help a lot of the other people that are just able to listen to recordings and things like that. So thank you very much for your time today. Okay. We'll hopefully see you next week. We're going to be talking next week. We're talking about metrics. Okay. We understand the sales process now. How do we look back on it and say, "Ooh, that's been successful." Right. So we'll talk about those pieces of the puzzle. I think we'll also talk a little bit about systems to use in order to get those metrics and things like that. Okay.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank
You're a
you.
rock star.